What's up, guys? It's a beautiful fall day out here in Quebec, and I'm enjoying my new daily driver, this 2014 BMW 328d, as in diesel, wagon. Now, as you guys know, I love wagons, and I got this one for a great deal, one owner, dealer serviced, for only 10,000 Canadian dollars. What's the catch? Well, it has a whopping 314,000 kilometers on it, which is what, roughly 200-ish thousand miles? Now, I wasn't too concerned when I bought it because this owner has taken such good care of the car. I mean, the whole front end of the car was clear wrapped as soon as he bought it. Mind you, it's in pretty rough shape and it'll have to be redone, but that'll be a project for next year. He's got the roof racks, he's got the bike racks, he's got the mats. I mean, it's literally a dream for any used car buyer. But after less than 2 days of driving, I lost all power steering and my dash lit up like a Christmas tree. All right, check this out. Day 2 here, and we get an absolute Christmas tree on the dash when we start it up. Chassis stabilization, steering, flat tire monitor, frontal collision warning, and pedestrian warning. So we've got to figure out what all these systems have in common, and I've got a pretty good idea of where to start. So today we're going to tackle that, do a bit of maintenance, but first I got to show you guys these service records because it's just unbelievable. Here's the original sales contract for the car, so keep in mind these prices are in Canadian dollars and it was purchased sometime late 2013. But as you can see, this was a hell of an expensive car, over $73,000 after options and taxes. Honestly, I didn't even know you could spec a 3 Series that high in 2013, but here it was, $49,350 base price with $16,000 of options. We've got the M Sport package, driver's assistance package, premium package, executive package, $800 metallic paint, $1,500 for the heads-up display, which in my opinion is just criminal because the heads-up displays in these cars, I just don't find them to be very good. So as you can see, it's a very well-equipped car, but it is missing one critical option that I'd really like, which is the M Sport adaptive suspension. The guy told me he thought it was included in this M Sport, $3,200 package, which makes sense, but it was actually a separate option. I think it actually cost about the same as the heads-up display. But for the price I paid, I think I'll be okay. Then we've got 6-year, 200,000 kilometer extended warranty, and then he spent $1,800 on a complete front-end PPF, which in my opinion is one of the best investments you can make on a brand new car. As you can see, this one is in really bad shape. It's all scratched up. I mean, it looks almost matte in some places because it's so sandblasted, but that means that the paint underneath is gonna be brand new when we peel it off. So we're going into wintertime here in Quebec, but next year in the springtime, we're gonna redo the PPF, give the car complete detail, and make it look like brand new. Moving on to the service records. This is page 1 of 22, so the guy really brought the car to the dealer for everything from major repairs to basic oil changes, and these are sorted from most recent, so I bought the car September of 2024, and as you can see, just at the end of August, he just replaced the harmonic balancer and belt, and I think that was something like $1,700 just right there. Next up, since this car is a diesel with over 300,000 kilometers, I was just going into this expecting to have to replace the DPF and EGR and all that stuff, but as you can see, a bunch of that work has already been done. So as you flip through the pages, you see that the DPF has been replaced, the EGR has been replaced, he's replaced some of the wiring in the bumpers, he's replaced the DEF pump, he's replaced the DEF injector, 2 rear lower ball joints, complete brake job, replace EGR, coolant. I mean, every single possible service, even some of the injectors have been replaced. Transfer case was replaced as well under a specific warranty. So as you can see, I'm not gonna go through them all because there's just way too much stuff, but this has gotta be one of the most well-maintained cars I've ever come across. But clearly that doesn't stop us from having issues. But that's all part of the fun, so let's get started. The first thing I wanna do is plug the car into ISTA so we can see what's really going on. And let me also just say that this is probably going to be a pretty in-depth electrical diagnostic. So if you're not interested in all the details, I'll put a timestamp on screen so you can skip to the part where we find out what the actual problem is. All right, we've got 22 faults here, and just so you guys know, when I got the car, I think there was only 2 or 3, and those were kind of unrelated, not important ones. So let's see what this has to say. I guarantee there's going to be a bunch of no communication. Signal fault, undefined content, or insufficient quality. USB unit. Okay, USB I don't think is relevant to what we're having right now. FlexRay failed. Invalid signal. No message. Missing message. Interface EPS, no message, signal, no communication possible. So basically all of these are communication related faults. So like I said, what we have to do is figure out what's consistent between all of these different modules, because when I was driving, everything was okay, and then the next minute, everything went off all at once. So that means whatever the problem is, it's related all together, whether it's a module that's bad, a ground, anything like that. So let's take a look at some of the diagrams and see what we can find. Here's the wiring diagram for the EPS rack, and it's actually quite simple. We've only got 5 wires, so it's a great example to show you guys how I go through a diagnostic. If you're not familiar with reading wiring diagrams, don't worry, it's a lot easier than you think. The gray boxes are components, so this main one is our EPS rack, component A67. Then we have 5 wires going to different places that come out of 2 different connectors, A67 1B and 2B. If we click on them, it'll show us where they are in the car, so we can see that it's the 2 connectors on the steering rack itself. Then if we look at the pinout, we can see that there's one 6-pin connector, but only 3 wires are used, 2 for FlexRay, which is a communication network, and 1 for terminal 15. On BMWs, terminal 15 is basically the wake-up accessory on power. Then on the other connector, we have terminal 30, which is the main power, and a ground. If we take a look at this diagram, we can see that FlexRay does a lot in the car. Integrated chassis management, dynamic stability control. So this would explain why we have so many varied faults in things that don't really seem related. You know, my power steering doesn't work, but I'm also getting a fault for flat tire monitoring. And that doesn't really seem related, but now it all makes sense because that's part of the DSC and we see that they're all communicating on the same network. So if we go back to the main wiring diagram, what's interesting is that the FlexRay communication connector isn't grounded independently. It just uses the main ground on a larger connector. So I'm willing to bet that we probably just have a bad ground and it's messing up the whole FlexRay communication, causing all those other faults. We can also see the location of the ground is in the right wheel well. So let's get the car up in the air and start there. Well, I wasn't planning on showing you guys how to remove the under trays because that's pretty simple, but look at the condition of some of these screws. I mean, I have worked on a lot of Quebec cars and I've never seen the under tray screws in such bad shape. I don't think this has ever been off. I'm really impressed right now, so we'll see what we can do. This is nuts. This is absolutely nuts. Wow. So here's that cable I was talking about, and I can tell at some point someone reinstalled this wrong because it's pinched in between this plate and the subframe. So I guarantee you there's probably a break in the wire here or a problem with that ground. The only problem is to take off this plate. These bolts are also in terrible shape. Good Lord. Now I'm trying to get creative here to show you guys what I'm doing, but basically now what we want to do is check continuity between the ground and the chassis of the car. As we can see, there is a huge resistance. So the ground is still making some kind of a connection, but it's really, really poor. So what that means for us is that somewhere between this connector and that ground on the body in the passenger side wheel well, there's a problem. So first I'm just gonna get this brake duct out of the way. Well, I thought I could pull it through like this, but obviously I can't and I'm not removing the bumper, so we'll just push this out of the way, I guess. So I'm gonna try and hook up my meter somewhere again here so you guys can follow along with what I'm doing. Go back onto the ground, then onto this main ground here, and this is even worse. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this ground off. We'll try and unwrap some of this heat shrink, and I won't be surprised if this is broken. As you can see, this is very easy to move, and this is normally a pretty stiff eyelet, so I guarantee you that this is just broken right under this heat shrink. This is supposed to be a 10, but obviously a bit corroded, so okay, that's actually not too bad. Now I'll unhook this. Let's unwrap some of this harness and see what we find. I haven't even made it very far, and I'm already finding all kinds of crusties in here. Oh yeah, that's a good connection right here. Just completely disconnected. This actually makes it really easy for us because now all I got to do is cut this off, strip this back a bit, crimp a new eyelet on, and then when we put this back on, I guarantee that's going to fix our problem. All right, well, that's not great. The corrosion still goes further down here. Look at this. Still keeps going. That's not good. We might have to replace the harness. And unfortunately, there's not really a lot of additional length that I can cut, so I'm trying to get you guys a good shot here, but this thing is totally finished. I've cut off a good couple inches now, and it's still just white dust inside here. Well, that's not great because that makes this repair a whole lot more expensive than I was anticipating. So you can see even all the way back here, I'm still pulling dust out, so. Well, I think that illustrates it pretty well. So I actually still am going to do kind of a quick fix here, and that's because this car at this point is my daily driver. I don't have another car to drive, and I kind of have to get to work tomorrow. So normally what you can do if your wire isn't in as bad a shape as ours, you can just cut the wire, slide a new lug on, crimp it, and then you'll be good to go. But like I said, since we have so much salt and corrosion through this entire harness, I'm just going to replace the whole thing. But for now, I'll crimp this, hook it back up, and like I said, I guarantee that's going to solve our problem. Probably not long term, and once that harness comes in a few days, we'll replace the whole thing properly. Normally, you should also get some heat shrink on here so that the corrosion doesn't go back into the harness, but again, we're going to be replacing it, so I'm just going to put it on like this. All right, well, I'm actually entering a competition for the world's worst crimp job here. Like I said, this is the wrong crimp, it's the wrong size. This is not the proper way to do it. This is just a quick fix to get me back on the road, and then we'll replace it properly in a couple days. If your harness isn't as damaged as this and you want to do this fix, no problem, but just make sure that you get the right size crimp, get some heat shrink, and do this properly. The torque spec on that is called good enough for now. Let's plug in those connectors and see if it works. All right, let's plug in ISTA and see if it works. So first of all, right off the bat, what I'm going to do is just turn the accessory on and see if we get all those codes coming back. So we've got ignition switched on. Service due. Yes, we're going to do the service now. Okay, that looks good. If we start the car, that works. And the EPS works as well. So there you go, problem solved. Now we're going to plug in ISTA again just to clear all the codes and then see if anything comes back. All right, so still 22 faults, but that's okay. We'll do display fault memory. We'll erase everything and then see what comes back. So we've just got these two codes left, microphone 2 open circuit and USB port deactivation due to overloading. Honestly, I'm not sure exactly what those are for, but I'm not too concerned about it because the microphone works just fine when I make a phone call, and I don't use the USB port. I always do Bluetooth audio, so the car is working properly so I can get to work tomorrow. I'm going to order all those parts that we need, then we'll come back in a couple days and do this properly. All right, well, a couple days and a couple dollars later, here is our brand new wiring harness. As you can see, it comes with everything we need. We've got the positive and negative. Look at this nice, beautiful eyelet on here. It's very solid. It's got all the new cable ties, new clips and everything. But if you notice, it also comes with all of this extra cable for this flex-ray communication wire. And after looking at the service manual, I find it kind of weird because what they want you to do is remove the cable, unwrap it, and then also unwrap this brand new one. And rather than use this new cable, they want you to reuse the flex-ray cable that's already in the car, because this gets fished through the firewall and I believe into the FEM, I'm not 100% sure, but somewhere into the car. So rather than do that work, you just undo it and use the one that's already here. So to get started, we just have to remove this cowl. peel back some of this weather stripping, take it off. So now we want to remove this plastic here so we can feed the new harness through. This just pulls right off. And obviously I've already disconnected the battery. And the smaller one is a 10. And then we've got two 8mm holding this plastic on. You got to be careful here because there's not a new connector on this side, so you don't want to break this. And now I think that this thing should basically slide out, maybe, hopefully. Okay, well, there's actually one more tab here, but I'm just gonna leave it like that. Now we gotta get through some of this tape on this plastic guard to open it up, so I'm just gonna cut it open without cutting too far, obviously, because you don't want to cut the wires underneath. And now we've just gotta start making our way through this harness here and unwrapping everything. This is an awful lot of tape we got to wrap back up after. Okay, good. And then we want to separate our power steering. And like I said, we're going to keep the flex rate intact. So now I'm going to come over here. Oh, there's still more tape to undo. Okay, so we've got this loose now. And then we want to separate it from this connector. I'll show you guys on here because it'll be a little bit easier. Basically in here, you want to push that locking tab that's on this part of the connector upward, and then this part will slide right out. Probably got to take this up too. Yes, pry this up. The waterproofing. Now this slides right out. And there we go. So that's what we've got on this end of the brand new cable. Oh, wow. Beautiful. Look at this. So now we simply just slide this right back into the connector, clips into place, slide the lock and grommet back in to make it waterproof. Now I realize I'm actually doing this backwards. You're supposed to go underneath and hook it up to the rack first and then work your way up just to make sure, I guess, that all the cables are lining up. So we'll go underneath, do that first, and then work our way back here. Once everything's nice and centered, we'll retape all this up. Before we start taping everything up, I want to quickly show you guys 3 different kinds of tape you'll find in automotive use, and they all have different applications. The first is your standard electrical tape, which is good for things like actual electrical isolation, but it's not the best choice for wrapping wiring harnesses. Instead, you should use this fabric tessa tape, but even then there's 2 different kinds. There's actually way more than that, but these are the 2 that BMW uses. This one is Tessa 51608, which is meant for use on interiors. It's much softer, and it helps quiet things down when used inside door panels and things like that. This is Tessa 51036, which is meant for use in things like engine bays. You'll see that it's a lot more durable. So it has better abrasion resistance, so that's what we'll be using for the harness. So here's the new one versus the old one. You can see that it comes with all new clips here and here. Got our new grounding point, and you even have a brand new cable routing harness here. The only thing, like I said, we have to unwrap all of this beautiful tape because we have to get the new flex ray out and retape the old one back in. They say just mark the wire. That way we know how far we need to tape. Very, very sticky. Now we can take off all of our little temporary zip ties. Open this back up. Here's our new connector. I won't slide that on all the way just yet. And now I'm going to unwrap this to grab our flex ray. Now I will swing this around here and plug it in. And now I just get my marks lined up and start taping it up. So I was just trying to get this hooked up, but then I realized that this wiring duct does not clip onto this subframe. It seems to be a little bit different than the one I had, which was much shorter and clipped right up like this. I'm not sure if one is for the X-Drive or non-X-Drive subframe, but I'm just gonna switch this out so we have the right bracket. Now we'll get this old temporary ground off. It worked good for the couple days that I needed it to. We've got our beautiful new ground. And I don't know if the construction is different on it now, but they also fill it with this kind of epoxy thing. So this is really well sealed. I don't know if that's how it came from the factory before, but I think it's probably an improved design to reduce the corrosion that comes through here. Brand new nut and torque to 9 Newton meters. Get this old guy out of here now. That looks pretty much damn near OEM if I do say so myself. Here's where we left off underneath, so I'm just gonna tape it to the rest of these wires and get everything back together. I'm running out of tape. Let's see if we can make it. I don't know if we can. Oh my God. Are you kidding me? I had literally 3 turns left. Oh my God, I don't know if I have any more of this right now. All right, well, unfortunately, as you guys can see, I'm still missing a bit of tape here, but the good news is that this is accessible from outside of this box, so we can still reassemble everything, close it up, and then when I get the new roll of tape, I'll just add a little bit extra here. Now we're gonna do our oil change, but there's a couple things I wanna point out first. So clearly you can see there's a leak coming out of what looks like the front differential, but if you take a closer look, it's just the axle seal because the top of the differential is still dry. And then this side also has the same leak. So we'll take care of those in a little bit. First, we'll do the oil. It doesn't look like this oil bolt has been off in a very long time. But that's probably just the corrosion because the iDrive is right on schedule. 16,000 kilometers, which for me is too much. We're going to do it a little bit shorter, but that's what the car calls for. Well, close enough. And if you're saying to yourself, that oil looks kind of dark, well, it's a diesel, so that's completely normal. New crush washer. And torque to 25 Newton meters. All right, well, now we're going to change the oil filter and put some fresh oil in. And you'll notice that the engine bay is looking a lot nicer than the entire rest of the car. And that's because as soon as I got this thing, I gave it a complete detail because it was in such terrible shape. Honestly, I don't think it had ever been washed in the entire 11 years it's been on the road. So I'm going to take this cover off. Our oil filter is right over here. Here's the oil filter up close. Looks pretty good, no sludge. And on these cars, the OE oil filter is the OX404. Pop this in. And then when you're installing it, you just gotta pay attention because you gotta line up this peg with the hole in the housing. This is very interesting. There we go. And then this is also torqued to 25 Newton meters. All right, well, that's nice. Not even a drop spilt there. Now I'll fill it up. Now the oil I'm going to be using is this Pennzoil Platinum Euro LX. Now it's important that you get an oil approved for BMW LL04, whereas the gasoline cars are BMW LL01, at least the ones I work on. The newer ones I believe are LL12. But the point is that LL04 is for diesels. What the difference is exactly, I'm not sure. I'm no oil expert, but that's what the spec calls for, so that's what I'm putting in. As usual, no funnels in this garage. Not bad. This calls for 5.2 liters. And now, guys, this is the most exciting part of this job. Take a look at this. This is an oil dipstick. As far as I know, they only have these on the diesel cars because I haven't seen one of these on a BMW in forever. But I'm very happy that it's here. There we go, perfectly right on the maximum line. And don't forget that this will slightly go down when we start the car, so this is perfect. Now we'll slide our cover back on. And while we're here, we're gonna do the engine air filter. Then gently pull up on the rubber grommets. I forgot we've got one connector right here. Okay, and now we're not even gonna remove the air box completely. I'm just gonna slide the filter out. Oh, that's looking very dusty. Oh, baby. Okay, well, I mean, honestly, not that bad. I've definitely seen a lot worse than this. OE Moly replacement, LX2077-4. I'm just gonna suck up some of the dirt here. Slide this guy right back in. And then drop the air box right back on top. MAF back on. And then 1 and 2 clips for the hood release. Good. Next up, we'll do the cabin air filter. So there's just 2 10mm screws. Now this should come down. Just have to unclip the footwell light. Get this out of the way. And then you've got 4 T20s that hold this cap on. Oh, did I say 4? I guess there's only 2. Oh yeah, there you go, just 2. And then you just pull this thing down. So again, honestly, the guy really took care of the car because this filter is perfectly fine, but we're in here, we'll change it anyway. I always replace my cabin air filters with these Hengst blue ones. It's just a little bit extra protection. Make sure that the arrow for the airflow is pointing the right direction. I probably should have pointed that out first, but you just want it to be pointing inside the curved part. 1 and 2. Footwell light. And now we can just slide this up and right back in. Put our 2 10mm back in. And we're all set. Now we're going to replace the fuel filter, which is also pretty easy to do. So first you start by prying up on this retaining clip. Then you need to disconnect this electrical connector on the back. Undo this fuel line. These are sometimes a little bit tricky. Undo the retainer. And then gently pry without damaging this heater element on the back. There it comes. Huh, that's a lot more fuel than I was expecting here. Oh shit, there's 2 clips on this. So now this has to be pried up too. There we go. And now we can separate this. There we go. All right. Oh my God, the amount of diesel on the floor. Jeez, I was not expecting that. So here's the old filter. We already know that this was changed not too long ago, 2022. Now the new one we're replacing it with is marked 2023. Again, as you can see, this is the OE Moly part. Don't forget this little gasket that's installed on the back side here. Now we'll slide this back on. Make sure you line up this keyway. Into this line as well. Lock the tab. Lock the other tab. Retaining clip back in. Connector. And then lastly, we can just secure it with the holder. And no torque spec on this, but it's a plastic bracket, so don't go crazy. There we go. Now, realistically, we probably didn't really need to do this considering it was replaced less than 2 years ago. But whenever I get a new car, I kind of like to reset all the maintenance, get everything done all at once. and we'll check and see. I'm not even sure if there's something in the iDrive under the CBS condition-based service for this thing, but we'll check and see. All right, now first start after our oil and fuel filter change. First, I'm just going to turn on accessory, plug it into ISTA, and reset our CBS. All right, well, everything still looks good here. No additional codes after a couple days of driving, so that means we definitely fixed the problem. Now we'll go into vehicle management, service function, maintenance, reset CBS. All right, so first we're going to reset the engine oil. All right, well, that's our engine oil. Honestly, I thought there was one for fuel filter, but I guess I'm wrong. So we'll close out of this now. And now what we want to do is bleed the fuel system. Now, this isn't really a necessary step. You could just start the car and the car will take a little bit longer to crank than usual as it fills up the fuel filter. But according to the service manual, you're supposed to do this. So I'm just going to show you guys how to do it. But again, I don't think it's really that important. So you go into powertrain, DDE, fuel system bleeding, bleed. Yes. Okay. I don't have enough gas in the car to actually do a bleeding, so it looks like we're doing it the old-fashioned way. We can close out of this. Yes. And let's see what it gives. All right, well, I mean, that really was not the end of the world. I don't think this is a super necessary step in ISTA, but like I said, I just wanted to show you guys that's technically how you're supposed to do it. All right, now the last thing I want to tackle for now are the glow plugs. Something well known to be one of the absolute worst jobs you can do on a diesel engine. Like I said, this car has about 314,000 kilometers on it with complete service history, and somehow these have never been replaced. Unlike spark plugs in a gas car, glow plugs aren't actually required to make the engine work because diesels work on compression and the glow plugs are just there to help in colder temperatures and for emissions. I don't have any codes or even any problems with the way the engine runs, so the normal thing to do would be to leave these the hell alone. But I just can't help myself and I'm going to change them anyway. Don't use this portion as a guide because I ended up removing way more stuff than you have to just because I wanted a few shot with the camera. But you actually only need to remove the acoustic cover at the rear and you're pretty much good. The glow plugs are all down here. So first I'm going to start just by blowing out these holes. Now I'll undo the glow plug connectors. These are usually pretty hard, so you just have to kind of squeeze and pull up. There are two different ways that I use to remove a glow plug. The first is doing it manually with a ratchet, which is slow and time consuming, but you're less likely to break something, especially if you don't really know what you're doing. And the second is using power tools. I'm going to show you both methods right now, but in either case, there are two things you can do to help make the removal easier, and this applies to any car. First, make sure that the engine is nice and warm, let it get up to operating temperature before you start working. And the second is to be generous with your choice of penetrating fluid. So liquid wrench, PB blaster, whatever you have. This is my favorite because it has by far the coolest bottle. Now we can start twisting and see what it gives. So these are 10 millimeters and you're best off to use 1/4 inch tools because if you need to put any more torque on it than that, it's too tight and you need to stop and try something else. Okay, so it just moved there. And then it tightens up again. So then what you do is you put it back forward and crank it tight until it's completely tight again. Backwards. And doing this, you're basically working the penetrating fluid in through the threads and breaking up some of that corrosion. Keep adding more penetrating fluid while you work and it starts to kind of make its way through the threads. Okay, so now I'm back tight. I'm going to undo it and look how much room that we have. I'd say that's almost 3/4 of a turn. And when we started, it was tight right away. So like I said, there's no real shortcuts to this. Take your time. Don't overdo it because like I said, if you snap one of these, you're going to have a really, really bad day. When you get to the end here, don't get too excited. Think that it's out and over force again. You've come all this way, keep taking your time. Uh-oh. Oh, thank God that was just the ratchet that slipped. Phew! Oh my God, scared the shit out of me. Now, I'm pretty sure the front one is pretty close, but this is why I said there are two different methods to do this. This one is the one I would recommend for people that don't really know what they're doing. They're not super comfortable with, you know, rusty fasteners and things like that, like I am in the salt belt. The other method is a lot faster, but it's a lot riskier if you don't know what you're doing. And don't worry about the penetrating fluid in the bore. It's gonna fall into the cylinder, but that's okay. It's just oil, it's no big deal. It's getting tighter, and there we go. It is out, I think. All right, here is our glow plug. So right here is a perfect example of why you have to be so careful when you're doing this job, because as you can see, these threads kind of started deforming as it was coming out. If this breaks off, you know, these threads jam up and you snap this top nut off, then it's a really tough time because you either have to drill it out, and this is very difficult to drill because the actual glow plug element, this part that gets hot, is tungsten, which is a very hard material to drill through. So like I said, be careful and take your time while doing this. Now, I'm not sure if you can see this on camera, but it doesn't say genuine BMW anywhere, but it just says Bosch, made in France, 7 volts, which is exactly what we're replacing it with. So just for fun, I'm gonna put the borescope cam down in here so you guys can see. It's a little bit hard to tell, but those threads are perfect in the cylinder head. There's no damage on them. A little bit of carbon, but nothing major. Then if we go down here, it's important to take a look at the condition of the sleeve and then the seat all the way at the bottom here, because this is what seals off the carbon from the engine. And a lot of times when people replace glow plugs, they don't do it properly in the sense that they don't clean this seat right. And if the seat isn't clean, you get all the carbon buildup and soot that blows by. It seizes up in the sleeve, and then even if the glow plug is fairly new, it can get seized in here because it's not just the threads that are stuck, but it's this entire distance that's got carbon buildup in between the glow plug and the cylinder head. So in goes our brand new one. I would recommend running it down one time, taking it out, wiping it off, just again making sure that there's nothing on the seat or in the threads, and then seating it and torquing it one final time. Beautiful. So now that we're sure that the threads and the seat are 100% clean, we can put this back in and run it down one last time to 13 Newton meters. And there you go. So all in, ratchet back and forth about 1,000 times, penetrating oil, installing the new one, cleaning everything up. It took me over an hour just to get one done. And this is a 4-cylinder, so we still have 3 more to go. It's actually one of the only times where you're happy you have the smaller engine and not the bigger engine, because that means we only have 4 to do and not 6. Now, like I said, for the second one, I'm gonna use a different technique that is gonna go a lot faster, but again, it's not something I'd recommend to someone who doesn't have a good feel for rusted or seized bolts. As you guys know, looking at the channel, I'm always dealing with rust and corrosion. It's where I live in Quebec or anywhere in the salt belt, really. You have a lot of those things, and feel, unfortunately, with bolts is one of those things that it's hard to explain verbally on camera. I've broken a lot of bolts in my time, and this is not the place where you want to start learning about breaking things. So for the 100th time, if you're not sure, just take your time and go slow, and definitely don't introduce power tools in here if you're not 100% confident with what you're doing. So the well is full of penetrating fluid, and it's been sitting there for at least an hour while I worked on the other one. I always start with the ratchet. So again, come here and try and break it loose and see what happens. Okay. This one's definitely tighter, but that's also because since it took so long, the engine has got a lot cooler now. So it's important that it starts to move. As long as it starts to move, even if it's just a little bit back and forth here, look, I mean, I don't even get a half a turn. I get basically a quarter turn, and then it jams up. So instead of going back and forth with the ratchet 1,000 times like I did the other one, what I'm gonna do is use an impact driver. Now, you definitely don't want to use an impact wrench. You want the lightest weight tool you can find, preferably with a small battery, maybe even one that's half dead, because all we want is that little bit of impacting force. Anyone that sees the bolts knows that it's the impacting force that helps break it free. So again, we're gonna go backwards, forwards, but using the impact, this is gonna take us probably 1/10 the time. I'm gonna put this on, and it's gonna be hard to see, but basically what you wanna pay attention to is how much rotation you're getting out of the socket. So right away, it's gonna spin about a quarter turn, then it's gonna jam up to the part where there's the corrosion. Then we're gonna go forward, and then as we go each time like that, it's always gonna make its way a little bit further, and you'll be able to monitor that by looking at either the writing on the extension or the writing on the socket. So let's start. So very quickly, it jams up. We see tighten, forward, backwards. See, and on this second shot, now the tighten is facing more towards me, whereas before it was more like this. So we've already made a bit more progress. So it's definitely going a lot faster than before. I'm gonna keep topping this up with penetrating fluid as we go. And there you go. Comes right out and in the exact same condition as the other one. New glow plug. And when you're running the new one in, always do that by hand. Take it out, remove, inspect, wipe everything down, and put it in one last time. And there we go. Now I'll do the back two off camera because there's not really much room to see in here. Did I just lose power? Oh, senor, fuck me. Oh, even if I finish this, I can't bring the car down off the lift. All right, well, nothing we can do now. I'm gonna finish the back two cylinders, get everything reassembled, and then we'll see if we can get the car down. Just to give you guys a close-up here, these are kind of like spark plug wires. They don't actually have any clips on them. They just have these grooves on the side to help you pull with pliers because they are on there quite good. Then when you come to reinstall them, they just click right into place. Well, now we've got kind of a spooky vibe here with no lights except for this one. Right now I'm going to speed run this engine bay. I'm going to get all these connectors back on. Oh, yes, just in time. Oh, thank God. All right, I'm actually gonna put the car down right now, just in case it decides to go off again. Oh, that is perfect timing. Wow. Got lucky for once. Final touch. All right, perfect. So now there's just a quick service function we got to run in ISTA, and we're going to be as good as new. All right, well, here it is, the 2014 BMW 328 diesel wagon, running like brand new. And yes, I know the car is very dirty right now, but that's okay because I call this my diesel work truck, mostly just because it bothers a whole bunch of people. But you know what, guys? I have bought a lot of cars over the last couple of years, and this is by far the best purchase I've ever made. I mean, all this for only 10 grand, you just can't go wrong. But at the same time, it's also a perfect example of why I tell people who are not mechanically inclined or who have no willingness to work on their own car to never buy a used BMW. I mean, check this out. The car is absolutely immaculate. It's beautiful inside. It was meticulously well maintained at the dealer. I love this split tailgate here. Close this, you can kick underneath here and it'll open a trunk. The car is very well optioned, very well taken care of, and yet still somehow after less than 2 days of driving, I lose all power steering and I've got a dozen codes on the dash. And if you're not willing to try and put in that work to figure it out yourself, you have no idea if this is going to be a simple sensor, maybe it's a wiring problem, maybe it's $1,000 module. better yet, maybe it's a $5,000 steering rack. And that's unfortunately what happens with a lot of people who buy used BMWs. They spend too much on a car, they have no money left over, and then when there's a problem, they say, oh, BMW, what a piece of shit, I'm never buying another one again. And believe me, BMW has a lot of piece of shit cars. I'm looking at N63, I'm looking at N20, but these ones are really good. The N47s are stout motors. Yes, the early ones did have timing chain problems, but by 2014 those were resolved, and obviously so, because more than 300,000 kilometers driven and a car runs like new. So let's close this, go inside and take it for a drive. I just love the way the diesels start up. It sounds like I'm driving around a farm tractor. The interior is nice as well, again, well taken care of, but I'm not a huge fan of the red leather. To me that screams more like an M3 or a fast racing car, not a 4-cylinder diesel, but it is what it is. Again, for the price I paid, I don't really care. So let's get going here. This engine has 180 horsepower, but it has 280 foot-pounds of torque. And from what I read online, a lot of people said, yeah, it's really not that bad. You know, the car, it goes. I don't know what car they're driving, but it's definitely not this one. Check this out. We'll do Sport Plus mode, Sport transmission, step on it, foot to the floor. I mean, you might fall asleep. 0 to 60, I don't know how long it actually takes. Maybe 8 seconds, maybe a bit less. 7.5 I think is the actual spec. I mean, this is not a fast car. I don't care how you try and paint it. Yes, it does have a good bit of torque. It feels nice driving around in the city. 280 foot-pounds is nice, but 180 horsepower is 180 horsepower, guys. You can't get around that. Maybe one day we'll do a stage 1 tune, gut the DPF. I think you can get pretty decent power gains from that. I think something like 50 horsepower and 50 torque gain on a basic tune. I don't want to push this thing too hard because that's not why you buy these cars. I bought it at least for the utility, and being a diesel, check this out. Fuel economy, 8 liters per 100 kilometers. And there's 2 things that you got to keep in mind. Number 1 is that I don't really do much highway driving. That's mostly city driving. And the second thing is, as I've said before, I drive like an asshole. So the fact that I can squeeze 8 liters per 100 kilometers out of this is just insane. You get this thing on a highway, you do cruise control at a reasonable speed, 120 or something, and you get something like 5 or 6 liters per 100 kilometers. I mean, you basically get 1,000 kilometers on a tank, which is incredible. So that's it for today, guys. The car's running extremely well right now, but not perfect. There's still a couple of things we got to take care of. For example, we saw that those shocks were leaking, but I just have no time to do it right now. And since it's not really affecting the way that the car drives, I'm not really in a rush to do it. At one point, we're also going to have to tackle this windshield. I don't know if it shows up on camera, but it's extremely scratched and pitted, so it makes it really hard to see when you're facing the sun. And we've also got to wrap up the N55 swap in Project 328 Wagon. But until then, as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one. Thanks, guys.